Notoriety among the defense bar recently because he's been very successful in some trials that he's done recently. He did a trial against Mike DeGuerin, a very well-known criminal defense lawyer from Houston, and won. And one of the lawyers from my office who watched the trial thought, I know he watched at least a voir dire, and he said that he thought Charlie did a better job than DeGuerin did, which at least that was enough to impress me. Charlie graduated from Hardin-Simmons College and then went to law school at St. Mary's. Before he went to law school, he had a stint as a petroleum geologist, so he has a diverse background. He's been with the county attorney's office since February of 1994, and he spent almost a year in the intake division and has been in court 5 since then. So Charlie's going to give you a demonstration, a very abbreviated demonstration of what a prosecutorial voir dire looks like. And on the defense side, we have Sam Bassett. Sam was actually a clinic student a long time ago. I'm trying to remember. How long ago? No, it's been a long time. But Sam's big claim to fame is he just had a baby. He just had a baby boy and became a father. And none of the other stuff matters a whole lot. But just for the record, he graduated from UT undergrad in '85 and UT Law School in '88. He was in the clinic. After he got out of law school, he went to work for the same law firm that Bill Allison works for, only it's had a lot of different permutations over the years, but most recently it's called Allison, Yeager, and Bassett. So anyway, Sam's here to give a demonstration of the defense voir dire. So Judge Shepard, take it away.
Okay. Calls number 193221, State of Texas versus Victor Alvarez. For purposes of jury selection, is the state ready to proceed?
The state's ready, Your Honor.
Defense ready to proceed?
Defense is ready.
Mr. Gross, you may proceed.
Thank you. May I have the witness forward?
Sir.
My name is Charlie Brown. I'm a prosecutor at the county attorney's office here in Travis County. We're here today because Mr. Alvarez, people in Travis County accused Mr. Alvarez of the offense of driving while intoxicated. This part of the proceeding is called voir dire. It gives the defense and the state an opportunity to talk and discuss matters with you to find 6 fair and impartial jurors to give both the defendant and the people of Travis County a fair trial. It's been said the hardest thing to change is a made-up mind. What we're trying to do is explore y'all's biases, outside influences, experiences that have happened to y'all to determine, find the 6 best jurors to serve to give Mr. Alvarez and the people of Travis County a fair trial. There are no right or wrong answers to the questions I'm going to ask. If something is personal or you don't feel comfortable answering in front of 16 or 17 of your newest friends, raise your hand and we'll go up and discuss it in front of the judge with Mr. Bassett and myself. As I said before, this is a DWI case. Is it Mr. Burleson?
Yes.
Have you ever seen him intoxicated?
Yes.
What made you believe that that person was intoxicated?
Just from the way they were behaving.
How was that?
Not having much control over their bodies or speech.
So, kind of,
Yeah.
poor balance. And
Yeah.
what about eyes? Anything? Was that not?
No, not really.
So, what kind of problems with balance did you notice?
They just weren't quite as coordinated as they would usually be.
Okay. Mr. Butter,
Yes, sir.
have you seen an intoxicated person?
Yeah, you bet. My brother-in-law.
Anytime?
Yeah, during football season.
What makes you believe he's intoxicated?
He drinks beer and watches the game. Goes through a 6-pack or better. So yeah.
So what? I mean, just
Oh,
the fact that he drank 6 beers?
loud and funny, and you know, he's glossy and kind of not coordinated, as coordinated as he should be, and, you can tell.
When he's loud and funny, is he not normally loud and funny?
He's a good guy, I mean, he's my brother-in-law.
Well, so does it loosen him up a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Daly?
Yes, sir.
How about you? Have you seen someone you thought was intoxicated?
Well, yeah, I'd say I've probably seen some intoxicated people in my time.
How could you tell? Do you have anything to add?
Well, just kind of like the first fellow over there said, I think you just kind of lose control of yourself when you're intoxicated. You're just not in your natural state.
Okay. Balance?
Balance, sure. It just affects your mind.
Our judgment?
Judgment, sure. Definitely.
You might do things you wouldn't normally?
Yes, definitely, I'd say that.
In the state of Texas, a person commits an offense if the person is intoxicated while driving a motor vehicle in a public place. Ms. Ford?
Yes, sir.
Do you agree with laws against driving while intoxicated?
Certainly.
You think driving while intoxicated is a problem?
Certainly. I support MAD
Oh, do you? Is there some reason why you chose to support that group?
simply because I just think that people shouldn't drink and drive.
Okay. The elements that I just read, driving, operating a motor vehicle while intoxicated in a public place, can be broken down into some these elements. Defendant drove and operated a motor vehicle in a public place in Travis County, Texas, while intoxicated by the reason of introduction of alcohol. Anybody here think that driving while intoxicated in a public place is insufficient law to find someone guilty of DWI? Mr. Burleson?
Insufficient in what way?
Yeah, well, just, do you think that covers it? The law to prove driving while intoxicated, that a person was driving in a public place while intoxicated? You agree with that?
Yeah.
Anybody think there ought to be more there that needs to be an element of that offense? The main issue in DWI cases is usually whether or not the person was intoxicated. Intoxicated is defined in Texas law as the person did not have the normal use of mental faculties or physical faculties, or had a alcohol content of 0.10 or higher. 3 ways of proving intoxication: loss of a mental faculty, or loss of physical faculty, or if the person has a alcohol concentration 0.10 or greater, the law deems that person to be intoxicated. Mr. Burr, what do you think of that definition of intoxication?
Well, it seems, pretty inclusive. You want to keep people off the roads for drinking and driving. I mean, that's pretty much covers it.
Mr. Burr, what kind of a mental faculty do you think a person needs to safely drive a car?
Well, I mean, you have to be able to certainly be alert and be aware of other motorists and be aware of where you are on the road, be aware of the fact that you're driving a car, which can kill somebody.
Sure. All right. I don't want to pick on your brother-in-law, or a person like him who changes a little, his personality changes a little bit. Do you think that's a change in the mental faculty?
I mean, I think it affects him, obviously. Sure.
Okay. Does he do things at times that he wouldn't normally do? Like judgment, like maybe crack a joke that he wouldn't normally tell, or?
he's funny when he's drinking and when he's not drinking. He's just a good guy. I'm sure, he loosens up, of course. I think most people, that's how alcohol affects you. It loosens you up a little bit.
Sure. Mr. Daly, do you have any ideas on mental faculty that's necessary to safely drive a car?
Well, yeah, I think you should be able to drive it safely. I do, in my work, I, get to see some people who, aren't, how do I put it, aren't what most people would think of as normal. And so, I think I'm probably a little sensitive to the idea of what normal is. But
What do you mean that people that aren't normal?
well, I work at the Travis State School, and a lot of people that I deal with, I've seen the problems they have. People laughing at them and stuff like that their whole lives just because they're a little bit different. That's just the normal way they are. That's the way God made them.
Well, that brings up an excellent point, because the normal use, a juror would have to determine whether or not a person had lost his normal use. And this normal use is for the jury to decide. The 6 that are ultimately selected will determine whether or not what is normal and whether or not Mr. Alvarez had lost his normal use of his mental or physical faculties. Mr. Burleson, Ms. Voir, what about physical faculties? What kind of physical capabilities do people need to safely drive a car?
Well, certainly they would need, proper eyesight, things like this, hearing, vision.
What about if a person can not stand up? Do you think that person can safely drive a 4,000-pound vehicle?
Well, it would depend on why they couldn't stand up.
Intoxicated.
I don't know. I'd have to just look at other facts and circumstances. I'm not comfortable with just making a broad statement that he or she didn't have the mental facilities or physical facilities. I need to see specific instances of what you mean by that.
As a juror, what evidence would you like to see of intoxication?
Well, of course, the best evidence would just be passed out, I think. That's obvious, but, to the level of no intoxication, but there's a broad spectrum in
Sure.
between there.
Like if this were sober as a church mouse, as they say, and this over here were passed out, drunk, you think we're saying there's a range of intoxication?
Yeah, about halfway in between and up, to me, would be intoxicated, and halfway in between and down may not be.
Okay, exactly. Well, the law in Texas defines where intoxicated would begin. And as, my definition of drunk might be different from Mr. Burleson's and yours. And also, it's not a crime to drink and drive, but it becomes an offense when the person is intoxicated. So, thanks for bringing that up. So are you saying that you kind of know it when you see it, you just need to see everything, as far as physical faculties to drive a car?
Yes, I would want to know, before I felt comfortable with saying that, I would want to know what you were claiming was the loss of physical faculties, or mental facilities, or whatever.
Okay. What do you think is a loss of the physical faculty?
Not being coordinated enough to steer.
Okay.
Things like this, not, being able to understand traffic lights or signs, or, not paying attention to what you're doing.
All right. Thanks. Point 10 or higher. This person, that's in the law, like I told you. The law deems a person intoxicated, deems a person to have lost his or her mental or physical faculties at this level of alcohol concentration. Legislature determined that. Do you know anything about making laws?
Yes.
Okay. When the legislature makes a law, what generally do they have hearings and take evidence on the fairness or propriety of the law or proposed legislation?
And they do what the people want.
Okay. Well then, their region?
Yeah.
Do you think,
State you grew up in.
sir?
I didn't say anything.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Jumping right over here.
I was just wondering what state he grew up in.
Well, like I said, Texas has chosen legislation .10 as the level where it deems a person to be intoxicated. Other states and the American Medical Association have a .08, which is lower. Texas has gone with .10, where it deems a person to be intoxicated. Mr. Bailey.
Sir.
If a person took a breath test or a blood test and it was determined that the person's alcohol concentration was .08, and we're in Texas, less than .10, is that person intoxicated?
Well, I guess it would kind of depend on what you're able to show about, like you say, it's either, there's two ors there, it's either mental faculties or physical faculties or .10. So, you know, that would determine it.
All right, yeah, that's not a trick question. When I started here, I thought, boy, if you're under that, you're not intoxicated. But like you said, you have to look at whether a person had lost mental or physical faculties. Like, Mr. Burke, you know someone who can kind of get loose on 1 or 2 beers?
Yeah, to my wife.
Okay, and your brother-in-law may take more?
Yeah.
Okay. Where your wife might not blow this, but she might have a little problem balancing or something. If I, as a representative of people, try to prove each of these elements beyond a reasonable doubt, is there anybody here who could not find a person guilty of driving while intoxicated? You satisfied with the law and with the elements and you don't have any problems with that? Nobody. Who's heard of the breath test? Breath work? Everybody? Mr. Burleson, what have you heard about it?
That's what they do when they think someone's driving while intoxicated. They ask them to take a breath test to try to establish if they are or not.
Have you heard anything whether it works or doesn't work, or it's
Well, I mean, I don't think it's as accurate as like weighing someone on the scale and you can pretty much pin down someone's weight. But the breath test might not be as accurate.
okay? If you heard evidence of how it worked and that it wouldn't depend on a person's weight to measure the alcohol concentration of a 100-pound person or a 200-pound person, taking all that into consideration, I mean, is that something you think is viable and something you could listen to?
Yeah.
And consider evidence of that? Anybody? Sir?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I'm just saying that I would also want to see what the person was acting like, you know, if they seemed intoxicated, just to kind of back up whatever their breath test was.
All right. Fair enough. Anybody heard that it's unreliable from friends? Don't take that thing. Anybody?
Well, I've heard that. I don't know whether, you know, can't say one way or the other.
Okay, has anybody here known anybody who's taken it, or has taken it themselves, or known anybody who's taken it? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I took one.
You did?
Yeah.
Do you mind if we talk about here?
No, that's all right.
Did, so you were stopped and arrested and?
Well, yeah, you know, they took me down, but I passed it, you know, it wasn't like I was, you know, they passed it.
Did they let you go?
Yeah. Well, you know, they let me go after, after a night in jail, they let me go.
Okay, you weren't charged?
No.
All right. Did you, while on the subject, did you do any field sobriety tests? Have you heard of those?
Yeah, they made me walk the line and touch my nose and do the alcohol.
Did you do well on those?
Yeah, I thought I did fine. I didn't think I was I did fine. I mean, I didn't, no, I thought I did fine. I didn't think he needed to take me down for the test. But I passed it, so,
Okay, then you were charged.
no.
Anybody else anybody else done a field sobriety test? Seen them done? Like driving by and see somebody out there? Ms. Ford, do you think that like simple agility tests, like walking a straight line or touching your nose, do you think that's a fair way to judge, or alphabet, saying alphabet, is a fair way to judge someone's mental or physical faculties?
Well, I think the alphabet would probably be, I don't know about walking a straight line, I mean,
Okay, well,
if you got on high heels or something, you might not be able to do that, or, I mean, if you, you could, just be tired or something too, that could go into that. I'm not so sure that single thing by itself.
No, that's fair enough. I think I agree if someone's tired, might not be able to do those things as well as you normally could, so it might have to look like you didn't have the normal use of your mental faculties. But say, for instance, barefooted, all of the things, not what if, but do you think some little simple agility tests are a way, not the only way, but a way to determine whether or not someone had the capabilities of driving a car?
Sure, if the other assumptions that you've made are correct, that would be a fairly simple agility test.
All right. Lawrence, if I came up and shook your hand and you smell odor of alcohol in my breath, what would you do? Or would you?
If you shook my hand as well as
Yeah,
you just did,
not close enough to you, and you just smell breathed on you, and you smell alcohol in my breath.
if you shook my hand as well as you did just then, I don't know that I would automatically assume you were drunk. Might assume you've had a drink recently.
Okay. Been drinking alcohol?
Yes.
Okay, I wouldn't want you to say.
Recent enough to have some residual odor.
Okay. Mr. Burleson, what do you think? If you smelled alcohol in my breath, what would you?
That you probably shouldn't be in court right
That I've been drinking?
Yeah.
Ms. Ford, you said that you were a supporter of MAD. Anybody else that supports of MAD or similar to SAD or some other organization?
I'd say I probably support, man, I'm not active on anything, but I think it's a good group.
Why do you think it's good group?
But I just don't think people should be drinking and driving. Basically, anything that gets drunk drivers off the road, I'm all for.
You think a person shouldn't be drinking and driving or shouldn't be intoxicated?
Well, I think they definitely shouldn't be intoxicated, and, a lot of times kids just can't tell the difference, So I personally think, the law is that you're not supposed to be, like you say, intoxicated. But, people like us just say drinking and driving.
Would you, if the evidence showed that Mr. Alvarez had been drinking, maybe a beer, would you automatically assume that he was intoxicated?
No, sir, I wouldn't assume just.
Would you go back to the law and just see if it was proved?
Yes, sir, I'd go with the law.
Anybody here been hurt or suffered a loss because of an intoxicated person or driver? Anybody here been pulled over by a police officer, bringing your speed ticket? I'm going to keep my hand there. Mr. Burleson, we'll start with you. Numerous times, I hope I don't get fried.
Just a couple, speeding ticket, running red light.
Did you think you're treated fairly?
Yeah, pretty much.
When I've been speeding, I usually knew that.
Yeah.
Did you ever fight those things, or did you just?
No, it just kind of makes you realize everyone else is speeding too, and they pull you over.
All right, but did you think that was fair? I mean, someone has to get somebody. Unfortunate, but
Just unlucky.
okay. Thank you. Ms. Ford, you had your hand raised?
Speeding ticket,
All right, were you treated fair?
certainly.
Mr. Bird?
Yeah, I have a few tickets, I had 3 or 4, and of course when I got pulled over.
Right. Your experience with the driving while intoxicated, I appreciate you sharing it with us. Do you think you were treated fairly there?
I don't know, every time you get pulled over, it's like you're saying, you pretty much know it. This guy that stopped me though that night was kind of, you know, he just had an attitude, and I mean, I know he's just doing his job, but,
Where was that? Was that here in Travis County? Was it APD?
yeah.
Would you, that experience, do you hold that against all officers?
No, of course not.
Okay.
No.
Mr. Daly, did you have your hand up? On the
Sure.
speed ticket? That's great.
I try not to speak.
You heard me mention beyond reasonable doubt, that these elements must be proved beyond a reasonable doubt. The judge is going to instruct or tell you what the law is with respect to reasonable doubt. I'm going to read a little bit of it right here. It is not required that the prosecution prove guilt beyond all possible doubt. It is required that the prosecution's proof exclude all reasonable doubt concerning the defendant's guilt. A reasonable doubt is a doubt based on reason and common sense after careful and impartial consideration of all the evidence in the case. It is the kind of doubt that would make a reasonable person hesitate to act in the most important of his own affairs. When this case is over and the judge instructs the 6 of you who are chosen, that charge, that will be read to you. There's some inconsistencies in it. First, it says you can't hesitate to act, yet it asks you to carefully and impartially consider all the evidence and base it on common sense. It's not required that the state prove guilt beyond all possible doubt, beyond all doubt, or beyond a shadow of doubt. It's a reasonable doubt, and that's what you, the 6 of you who are chosen, will decide. Does anybody have a question about reasonable doubt? Ms. Ward, will you say something? Defendant, Mr. Alvarez, this is obviously the United States of America. Defendant, we all share rights that are essential to the way we live. First of all, we're innocent until proven guilty. Right to a jury trial. Right to discovery. Travis County, the defendant was late and looked in my file here. I don't know what they're thinking. He knows exactly what I'm bringing. I don't know anything of what they're going to say. That's his right. That's only fair to know what's coming at him. Innocent until proven guilty. Right now, this man is charged with offensive driving while intoxicated, but that simple charge or allegation has no weight. It's no inference of guilt whatsoever. So if we were to vote right now, is Mr. Alvarez guilty or not guilty? Mr. Byrd, how would we vote?
It's not guilty.
Okay, you've heard no evidence. Does anybody disagree with that? Mr. Alvarez also has a right not to testify. You've all heard on TV, you have a right to remain silent. Similar to that, he doesn't have to take the stand in his own defense. He doesn't have to produce any evidence at all. And the fact that if he doesn't, you can't use that against him. It's just nothing. He just chose not to take the stand. He has a right to. On the contrary, if he does decide to take the stand, you don't give him a special badge, or he's not deserving of any special element or special credibility because he did decide to take the stand. Jump that hurdle where he has a lot of guts. We just treat him as any other witness, and that y'all would decide the credibility of it. Now, this portion, the Texas has what they call, it's kind of a two-tiered system, guilt and punishment. Right now, we're talking about guilt only, whether or not the defendant is guilty of driving while intoxicated. If so, then we come back and resolve a punishment issue. But right now, you restrict, the issue is guilt or innocence only. Only was he driving while intoxicated, was it proved beyond reasonable doubt, or not. Now, I guess finally, is there anybody here, any reason whatsoever, that couldn't sit on this jury and find a person guilty of driving while intoxicated if these elements were proved? Don't want the responsibility, don't feel comfortable in sitting in judgment of somebody else. You need to know now, it's happened before. And you need to know now, and there's nothing wrong with it. If anybody does. Anybody? All right, thank you very much.
Mr. Bassett?
Good morning, I'm Sam Bassett, and I represent Victor Alvarez. It's only fair as we get this process started that I tell you just a little bit about myself and Mr. Alvarez. I've been practicing law for about 6.5 years, always on the defense side. I'm married, have a new son, like to play golf in my spare time, work in the yard. Mr. Alvarez is a sophomore at the University of Texas at Austin. He is majoring in engineering, and he's from Nicaragua. English is his second language. One of the things I want to talk with you about, and I want to be very clear, I'd like for you to do most of the talking, or for you to feel free to interrupt me at any time, because this process of voir dire is for us to determine if this is the appropriate case for you to be a juror. In some cases, I wouldn't be a good juror. I love dogs. I were called to be in an animal cruelty case. I don't think I could be a fair juror. And I might raise my hand and say, look, I love dogs, and this is something that I feel personally, and maybe I shouldn't sit on this case. It doesn't make you a bad person. We just need to know about it, and I want you to feel free to interrupt me at any time. Let's suppose, Mr. Burleson, let's suppose that you pick up the Daily Texan tomorrow, and the headlines say, UT football coach John McAvoy arrested for driving while intoxicated. Okay. What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you read that headline?
What do you mean, the first thing that comes to mind?
Yeah, what do you think about whether or not he's guilty or innocent? Or what do you think of him after you read that headline?
You usually think he's probably guilty because when you get pulled over, you're usually doing something wrong.
Right. Mr. Burr, what do you think? If you read that headline? And I don't want to get into coaching criticism.
Well, I guess when Rudy Tomovich got his, I kind of wondered where he'd been or what he'd been doing before he got it.
Did any of y'all hear about the Eric Williams thing in Dallas? The offensive lineman for Dallas who was investigated for sexual assault? Anybody hear about that?
Yeah, I think I heard something.
And he crashed his car, I think this is another thing. What do you think of, what did you think of that when you heard about it, Taylor?
I can't say I really thought much of anything. I just figured, football player kind of thing, big city Dallas kind of thing.
Well, the reason I bring that up is because I think that's perfectly a natural reaction, Mr. Burleson, to say, well, the guy must have been guilty of something. He was arrested. He certainly probably was guilty of what they say he was. I think it's a reaction I have, particularly when I read about a horrible crime. Somebody arrested for, the Town Lake bike jacking. There's certainly worse crimes, but that's pretty bad. I think, well, I'm glad they got the guy. Or I'm glad that they stopped that drunk driver. I think that's a natural reaction when you read the newspaper. But when you come in here, we ask you to set all that type of stuff aside and to presume that Victor Alvarez is innocent until the state proves his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. What do you think? And do you think that's possible? I mean, we're here, Victor Alvarez is charged with driving while intoxicated. He's been arrested. What do you think about the idea that as we sit here right now, we're to presume him innocent until the state brings forward evidence beyond a reasonable doubt? Ms. Ford, what do you think of that? Do you think that's possible? And if you do, why do you think we asked you to do that?
Well, I think you asked us to do it so that he could, in the hopes that he'll get a fair trial.
Right.
But, a lot of people do worry about guilty people getting off and things like this.
Do you ever worry about that?
Not necessarily.
What do you think of the right to, you call it a fair trial? Tell me what you mean by fair. What in your mind is a fair trial in a criminal case?
Well, when you get a jury of impartial people and they get to hear all of the evidence and assess it and, or explain the law and all of this, so they'll have an idea of what they need to do.
Right. Have any of you heard of we talk about standard of proof, and that's kind of lawyer talk. We talk about in criminal cases that the proof required is beyond a reasonable doubt. In other cases, the proof required is less. Let's suppose, Mr. Burr, I sue you for throwing a rock through my window, $200 window cost. Do you know what the standard of proof I would have to prove to have you pay for that window is?
Yeah, it's beyond well, no, I don't know. I'm not sure that I do.
Does anybody know? Anybody heard of the other? In a civil lawsuit, there's a different standard of proof, or a different level of proof that we have to show, and it's called preponderance of the evidence, which kind of means 50.001% of the evidence you win. Well, that's clearly not the case in criminal cases. Depending on who you talk to, it's much higher. Let's suppose I leave my child at home unattended and CPS gets called and they want to take my child away. Does anybody know what the proof required to take someone's child away is? That's called clear and convincing evidence. And that's lower than what's required in a criminal case. What do you think of that, Mr. Daly? Why do you think we have such a high standard in a criminal case?
Well, I guess it's just maybe it's even just to, kind of like he was saying, we all think they're guilty to begin with, so it kind of balances things out, I mean, this is one kind of courtroom, there's always the bigger courtroom, he's going to have to deal with too, so.
What do you mean by the bigger courtroom?
God's watching everything.
And do you think our courtrooms are appropriate for determining everything? I mean, you seem to imply that there are some things that we as humans just can't do.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I think it said, given to Caesar's what Caesar's and God what's God's. So, I think this is kind of that kind of situation.
I take it that do you attend church regularly?
Yes, sir.
What type of church do you
It's a Congregationalist church.
Is that here in Austin?
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Burleson, what do you think of this high standard of proof in a criminal case? Do you think it's right?
Yeah.
Why?
Because you don't want to punish someone until you're sure that they did what they're accused of doing.
One of the interesting things about a DWI case is it's one of the few cases where you can be convicted and sentenced to jail based on someone's opinion. Because we're talking about it, and Mr. Daly, you did a good job of touching on this earlier, the normal use of mental faculties or physical faculties. Tell me a little bit more about your job. You said something about Travis State School, and you get a little irritated when some people criticize some of your clients for being not normal. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, we got clients there, and they vary in range of mental retardation from those who just can't really take care of themselves to some pretty severe cases. So, you get to see a lot of people who, it's just the way God made them. They all sorts of deals. Some people can do something. Other people do other things.
Right. Do you think that's true of people even outside the state school?
Well, yeah.
Some people act different in different ways.
Well, one thing you learn when when you're around that kind of people is that you just start to see all kinds of different ways people act. Out there, all kinds of all the way from lawyers to people like us to.
Right. What do you think of that, Mr. Burke? What do you think of the idea that someone can be convicted based on someone's opinion about what's normal?
Well, I mean, that's why we have that standard in there, about the .10, isn't it?
Sure, that's an alternative way that a person can be convicted. But in a situation where a person doesn't take the breath test, then you can still be convicted based on this first part, the normal use. What do you think of that?
I'm speaking from my experience. I mean, this cop, when I got pulled over, he had it in for me. So I'm glad that there's something else there that's a little more concrete.
Were you pulled over at night, do you remember? Was it on a highway or a street or?
It was on Anderson Lane, so.
Fairly busy street.
Yeah, busy street.
Tell me what it felt like when you saw the lights in your rearview mirror that night.
Well, I was nervous. I wasn't exactly sure what I did to get pulled over, but I've been out with some guys from work, and we'd had a few beers, and I knew the cop would figure that out, so.
So how do you think your nervousness affected you in that situation? Your speech or the way you walk, talk?
Well, I was nervous, but I thought I did real well in the test that they gave me. So, he felt the need to take me down to I guess 8th Street and run the test anyway, but.
So y'all apparently had a disagreement about what was normal.
Well, I didn't sit there and argue with him or anything,
Sure.
but I remember that I answered all his questions, and, the guy just had it in for me. It was a weekend night, and he was trigger happy.
What do you think a police officer might be thinking when he or she pulls over someone who's driving and has alcohol in their breath, but is not real clear about whether or not they should arrest them? How do you think a police officer might react in that situation?
Yeah, that's probably what happened to me, and that's why they went in and gave me the test.
Ms. Ford, what do you think about a police officer evaluating a person stopped for possible driving while intoxicated, and the person stopped speaks English with a heavy accent? How do you think that might affect the officer's evaluation of that person?
You mean that you think the officer may have a racial bias or something? I don't understand your question.
Well, let's say you were trying to evaluate whether or not I was intoxicated. I spoke with a very thick accent. How do you think that would affect how you evaluate me as to whether or not I was intoxicated?
Well, I guess it could impair my judgment.
Okay. What kinds of things might cause that to happen? And I'm not talking about you specifically, but just a police officer or any person.
Well, I don't know, maybe if one of the things you talked about was reciting the alphabet, there could be some problem with that. Maybe someone with a heavy accent, you just couldn't understand what they were saying. And, could have construed it as saying it wrong or something, when maybe it wasn't.
Mr. Burleson, what do you think about someone where English is their second language and being evaluated by somebody whose English is their only language? How do you think that might
Makes it hard to seem normal, because you probably have an accent in whatever your first language is.
What do you think of this, Mr. Daly, this language question?
Well, I think, here in Texas, most people are kind of used to hearing people talk with accents. And, I don't know, I think policemen, they're just trying to do their job, most of them just trying to do the best job they can,
But even an officer who is trying to do the best job he can, do you think it might have an effect on his evaluation?
Well, it might have an effect. I really couldn't say, it probably depends something on the officer that, was doing the evaluating.
Sure. How many of you have ever done any kind of a field sobriety test by the side of the road? No, Mr. Berg, you obviously have. Anybody else? Has anybody ever heard about the test that people suspected the DWI are asked to do? Heard the type of test? I mean, Mr. King talked about ABCs and.
I think I've seen them on those TV shows, like Cops.
911.
911.
Okay. Do you think, have you ever tried to do those tests?
No, I can't say that I have personally.
Do you think you would, how do you think a person who tries those tests for the first time would do versus someone who's done it many times?
Done many times? Well, probably, if you did it a lot of times, you would probably do a little better on it, you'd be more used to it, but, I can't say really.
Does anybody here not drink at all? Mr. Burleson, tell me what the reasons for you not drinking are, if you don't mind talking about it.
I'm a Baptist, and I don't believe in it. I've never done it, and I've never felt the need to.
It's a personal and religious conviction?
It's mainly personal, I just really don't feel the need to.
Do you have friends that drink?
Yeah, a lot of them.
What do you think of people who drink?
Well, I don't think any less of them for it, but certainly a lot of times they get drunk and make fools out of themselves.
Right. Thank you for talking about that. Mr. David, you raised your hand also.
Yes, sir.
Tell me why you don't drink.
Well, actually, much like the gentleman over there said, I just think that, God didn't intend us to drink. If He expected us to act like that, He would have made us act like that to begin with.
Okay. And do you think that idea would affect you being a juror on this case?
No, I think I can set that aside and try to, be objective.
I mean, do you feel that the state should be held to their burden of proof in a DWI case, in spite, even if you hear evidence that the person wasn't drinking?
I think I could set aside, my own personal feelings about drinking.
Do you think that's important in this situation to be able to set that aside?
Well, it's like you were talking about before that, this is a courtroom, and they got to prove what they got to prove.
Do you think that's important to have to prove that?
Well, yes, sir.
Why?
Well, because, like I was saying before, there are different rules. That's, whatever happens here, the defendant's going to have to, answer whatever he's done later. So, the rules of this courtroom should, they've been brought out over time, and, I think that they're good rules.
Let's talk a little bit about thank you for sharing that, appreciate it. Let's talk a little bit about the breath test machine. It's also called the intoxilizer. That's what we use in Texas. The Department of Public Safety is elected to use the intoxilizer as a measure of a person's blood alcohol concentration. We talked about it with Mr. King a little bit, and was it Mr. Burles? Who was it that said that they heard it wasn't really reliable? Anybody say that?
I said it might not be perfectly accurate.
Okay. You said it wasn't like putting somebody on a scale and weighing them?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me what you meant by that, or what you've heard about that.
Well, really if someone is, takes the breathalyzer and reads a 0, they're not drunk, but the question is someone intoxicated, borderline?
Right. So in those borderline cases, what do you think about this device being used in cases?
Well, you use the other stuff, how he did on the field sobriety test, you just weigh all the factors. If he did fine on everything else, you might be inclined to think, well, he probably, wasn't intoxicated.
So you look at other things besides the machine, right?
Yeah.
Well, why not just look at what the machine says?
Well, if it's perfectly accurate, I don't know how accurate it is, but if it is, then that's fine, but if it's not, you need to look at other things.
What do you think about that, Mr. Burke?
I was just gonna say, I understand it's law and all, but I think that, I sort of, was upset that I had to go through that process and, that I had to spend the night in jail because of being poor. And ultimately, I guess that's what kind of saved me, but, there wasn't anything wrong with me that night. I was walking fine. I spoke to the police officer. I was friendly and nice, and he throws me in his car and takes me to jail. And when it was all said and done, I spent the night in jail practically. So I guess I understand the reason for the standard. It'd be nice if they had something a little more conclusive. But I understand that you need something because it is such a subjective thing.
Ms. Ford, how would you feel about a system where we said, look, if you blow into this machine and this number comes up, then you're convicted. No trial, no nothing.
Well, I probably wouldn't feel comfortable with that.
Why not?
Well, the machine could be off. There's, it's just a machine without something else there to show that you could be drunk. I don't know that I would, or intoxicated.
Do you think that the measure of intoxication in a DWI case, what do you think is more accurate? I'll ask you this. Sampling a person's breath or taking a blood sample? what would you think would be the more accurate measure of whether or not a blood alcohol concentration is above 0.10? Which would you choose?
Blood sample.
Why blood sample?
Well, I think that's a process that you're looking at from a chemical point of view versus just a machine that's sitting there that may or may not be working right, but I guess it's hard for your blood to lie or be inaccurate.
Does anybody disagree with that?
Sam, let's go ahead and turn it off so we can have some question time here.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess, Trevor, why don't you kind of tell everybody what it is you're trying to do in Voir, and how it is you're trying to do it?
I like to get people talking. I mean, on any issue, you're limited kind of issues there, but the more people talk, the more you find out about them. I like to get them without being not serious, but laughing is good. If you can get somebody to say something funny, get them laughing, it gets them relaxed, and just start talking, and then you can figure out what kind of jurors they would make. So that's my main point, and then educate them on and drop little points in that you can argue later, but education and get them talking on too many goals.
Sam, what do you?
I agree with Charlie completely. The number one goal I have in Voir is to get information about them. Voir is unlike any other part of the trial because you have to give up control in order to get what you want. Assuming you want information from the jurors, you have to give up your role as an advocate almost. You don't totally give it up, but in a way you give it up because if you're a total advocate during Voir, you're sitting there trying to cram stuff down their throat. And what I try to do in Voir is take off that hat for a little while and do my advocacy in a different sort of way, and that is I want to know if they have anything bad to say about that. I want to know the bad stuff. Because I'd rather it come out during Voir than in the jury room when they explain about my client and I don't know why they came back with a guilty verdict in 3 minutes because their little girl was killed in the driving while intoxicated. I'd rather know that in Voir and get them, if I can't get them off for cause, get them off by striking them. The second thing I try to do in Voir is advocacy in a funny sort of way. It's not like an argument, but you may have noticed one of the things I was doing with the language thing with this panel. Language is a key issue in this case because this is a Nicaraguan student and this is an officer who arrested him for being intoxicated, and that's an issue. And I tried to draw that out of them, and that was kind of a backhanded way of doing some advocacy. So you can't ignore doing advocacy, but you can only set it up. You can't finish the loop during Voir. And the third thing I try to do during Voir is to develop a rapport with the jurors, potential jurors, because eventually 6 or 12 of those people are going to be on your jury. And if they think you're an asshole, your chances of winning are a lot smaller. And if you develop a rapport and you make them feel at ease, then that's half the battle.
Y'all have any questions of either one of them?
When you say develop a rapport, I mean, how far do you go with developing that rapport? I mean, is there that's to have drinks with the actors on the line in which...
There's the spectrum of the used car salesman and the librarian, you know. I mean, you've got to build a rapport, so you've got to get over in the middle somewhere, but if you come across as a little too smug and too slick, then it's going to backfire on you. The best trial advice I've ever gotten is be yourself in trial. Don't try to be someone you're not. And that's real important when you're talking about rapport building.
Because they'll sense it.
If you're being fake, it's all over with.
I've heard for years and years, as we evolved through trying to develop how to do Voir, which is the last thing that we're figuring out about how to try cases. And for years people said, you really want to develop rapport. But nobody ever said how you develop rapport. Well, to me, that's a byproduct of what you're doing up here. I mean, it's not, nobody can just go develop rapport, and we aren't trained to do it. We can do other things. And I think what Sam says is being yourself and being sincere and trying to be honest with them and keeping them talking is what develops rapport. But for you to worry yourself to death about, how am I going to develop rapport? No, I mean, it's a byproduct of doing other right things that the rapport gets built. So people come in and says, you know, you got to go in there and build rapport. Tell them to stop and give you some ideas of what concrete you can do, what tools can you use to build that rapport. Make them think about what they're saying, because that's not, there's no information in that advice. It helps you.
I'd say you start by listening, genuinely listening.
Oscar, did you have a question?
I know that's not evidence, but I mean, how far can you go on these type of documents as far as highlighting like big words that are good for you or, or stuff like that? Like I think you have alcohol circle and a line.
Yeah, excuse me, that was just something I used in a trial that I just pulled out of the file. We're in here, I would have made it cleaner and not highlighted anything.
Oh, okay. I was wondering how far you could go. I know it's not evidence, but, or what type of documents you can use.
Yeah, you can do anything you want to. I don't know if there's any restriction on how you can put up the terms of the statute, as long as you're staying in the areas that you can voir dire in. That is, the nature of the law, the elements of the law, things like that. I think you can present it almost any way you think will be effective.
Excuse me. Do you ever voir dire with the jury on the issue of compromise verdicts? And how do you approach that?
I often will talk about the lone juror, you know, in voir dire. I'll say, look, you know, what if you're in a situation where there's 5 people in there saying, you're crazy, this guy's guilty as hell. And you're like, no, I'm sorry, I think he's not guilty. I have a reasonable doubt. I'll voir dire on that a lot. Because as a defense lawyer, I like a juror who's not afraid to stand his or her ground, because more often than not, the swing with authority, with the mainstream is going to be in favor of the state. And that's a gross generalization, but I found it to be true in most every case. So I'll voir dire on that and try to get people thinking that this is a 6 individuals' decisions. This is not a groupthink thing. Because I think groupthink, and this is my bias, but I think groupthink favors the state in criminal case generally.
Yeah, you want independent thinkers.
Yeah, based on their answers, who would each of you strike and why?
How many strikes do I get?
As usual, not enough.
I'd probably strike Bailey. Cora Ford made me a little nervous, and so did Burleson, but Bailey really made me nervous.
That makes us nervous too.
When you start talking God and the higher courtroom, I get a little concerned.
I just third. And Ms. Ford, close second.
Wow.
I didn't think anything was good, really, except the mad thing.
Well, I just, I gave you that, but then I deliberately kind of did.
Right, and I usually don't even ask about the mad thing. I want them to bring that out, because if I get one to see on there, that's great, but it was definitely bird.
So I have a question. So you have certain people that you know you don't want in, and certain people that you know you do want in, but then you also have certain people that are borderline. You just don't know. So if you make a decision to keep someone in that's borderline because of your gut instinct, do either one of you ever found out if that one that you kept on a gut instinct made a difference?
Absolutely.
Have you have a kind of an empirical study on that?
No, not an empirical study, but my experience is I've had occasions where I just had a gut instinct about someone, and they ended up being the poor person in the jury. And it went for me on a couple of occasions. And then I'd say when you're in the jury selection process, the most important thing is to get people beside you. And I like a non-lawyer to be listening, because intuition, this is an art, not science. And intuition, gosh, varies with each person, so I like to have input from everybody.
So your gut instinct has, so far, is a good weapon to have.
Sometimes.
I think ultimately it's what you've got to rely on. I mean, you don't have a lot else. And what you'll find is that if you're picking a felony jury and you've got 12 strikes, the first 10 are pretty easy. I mean, that takes That takes if you got 15 minutes, you get the first 10 strikes in the first 2 minutes, and you'll spend the rest of the time. Next strike's going to take, 5 or 6 minutes, and then you're going to, and you will run out of time.
If you get 12 strikes, you're also in a different state.
You'll always run out of time without asking. I mean, you never run enough strikes.
The defense team in cases I've tried, we've had multiple people picking the jury. We've often had arguments over who to strike. No, I don't strike him. He was looking at your client funny.
In most situations, I think you also involve your defendant, your client in that process. There may be situations where you wouldn't, but
Maybe that case you described.
yes. Yeah.
So we asked if either one of you attended Voir dire and the other attorney started to do something that you thought was improper or that was hurting your client, and what did you do about it?
Yes, I have, and my philosophy about trying cases, Bill Allison and I are interesting in trial together because he'll be kicking me to jump up and object, and I don't like to object, and it's a difference in styles, but we're good for each other, I think, but I generally don't object unless it's something that I think is very clearly improper and it's hurting me. Improper and not hurting me, I don't care, Be improper and not hurt me as long as they want. So, yes, and more variety issues that come up are when they start talking about the evidence in the case and trying to get the jurors to comment or commit to particular parts of the evidence of the particular case, and that's something.
Misquoting the law.
Yes, misquoting the law is a
Big area where both sides get into trouble. When the prosecutor tries to paraphrase what the law on the breath test is, and the law is what it says it is, and it's not anything different. It's not something you can just play around with, and it's something that's quoted, you need to point it out. Those judges are pretty good at that. And they don't want the prosecutor misquoting the law. So everybody's agreed on what it is, everybody knows what's going to be given to them, and you need to have it down code. As a matter of fact, when we tried this case, 14 years ago, the prosecutor misquoted, it was back when we used no breathalyzers, misquoted the law, caught him on it. I had a copy of the breath test law in the trial book, but I had writing all over it. He turned to me and said, "Oh, can I have your copy?" And I said, "No, I can't loan this. This is all from the jury panel. I can't loan it to you because I've got trial notes on it." Doc Jones we had to shut down the trial, made him go up to the fourth floor library in the courthouse, this is before we had the annex, get the law, bring it back down, and read it to the jury. Now, that was pretty embarrassing for the prosecutor, to have to shut, the judge had to shut down the trial and make the prosecutor go get the law because he couldn't cite it the way it really was. It turned out to be a good point for us. But that's another, don't want to misquote the law. It's not that they're trying to mislead, it's just they don't, it's hard to stay right on track. You do what Charlie did, and that's if you've got a copy of the charge, and say, "I want to read you something out of the charge." That's not going to be a misquote.
Just real quickly, in our packet for today, they list a bunch of things to look for and a lot of sample questions. And I'm wondering, I would sort of expected y'all to go through more of a laundry list, especially towards the beginning, and just saying, are you related to a police officer? Have you ever served on a grand jury? And all that. And I noticed that y'all sort of did that, but you spent a lot more time, with the ones that you did hit, just kind of getting everybody's viewpoint and opinion on it. And I was wondering, is that something you do at all, the laundry list, or not really, or?
I don't spend a lot of time on things that jurors have already filled out, unless there's something interesting. I would have asked you what business you're in. I didn't like that Presidio Enterprise. I didn't know it could have been an alcohol beverage distributor or something, but I already decided to get rid of it, so I didn't waste time. And today was abbreviated. We'll throw in more.
Right.
And I get people talking to. I usually start with stuff like that to loosen people up, but I don't know. You win. I think you win a case of Voir dire, an opening statement, and if you're, I think, spending too much time on the cards that they've already done, they're going to get bored with it, and you're not going to build new time.
I agree, and I think the worst prosecution Voir dire I've ever seen are the ones where they say, "Okay, I'm going to start on row one. How many of you are biased and prejudiced against people who drink? Okay, thank you. Row two. How many of you are biased? Thank you. Okay. Row three. It's just bores people. It doesn't get you anywhere. And in this, I really wanted to get to the heart of what a court hour should be about, and that's rapport building and getting the jurors to talk. And there's a little bit of necessary stuff to do, but I really try to stay away from a lot of that stuff. But Charlie didn't do it long board. I mean, I think he did great.
Thanks. Good luck with that.